Melochim, Berekei Halacha Beis. The Rambam says, Mochamis mitzvah in its own little bo. Here we go down to the Peirush HaMeir mitzvah. The king doesn't have to ask little bo Rishus Bezdin. He doesn't have to ask the Sanhedrin. He can go out at any time by himself, on his own volition. The Kohen he forces them to come out. When it comes to the Melochim, which he decrees, and Moetzes, you cannot take the people out. Only if there is a bezdin of 71. Kesev Mishnah. Kesev Mishnah points out the two Mishnayos, which are men say there. Only the Melochim or Shus, the king has to get permission from the bezdin of 71. The first one is found in Sanhedrin, Perik Aleph. We don't got to Mohammed's Rishus, only according to Bezdin Shel Shivim Ve'echod, as we find in Perik Hem of the Sanhedrin, Halacha Aleph. Both those things that are done through Bezdin HaGodol. These are among the things that are done by Bezdin HaGodol. In the second Mishnah is in Sanhedrin Perik Beis, Mishnah Dalet. He goes out to Mohammed's Rishus, according to the Sanhedrin of 71, that it's mentioned here because the Mishnah deals with the levels of the king. In Perik Hey of Hilchos Sanhedrin, Halacha Aleph, the Rambam mentions you do not add to a city or to the Azorah, the Beis Hamikdash. You do not go out to Melochim of Rishus, a permissible war, only with Bezdin HaGodol, the Bezdin of 71, which is found at the temple. As it says, any great item they shall bring to you. So his Yontif in Sanhedrin infers from the language of the Mishnah, and he goes out to Melochim Rishus according to Bezdin of 71. That Sanhedrin does not have the permission to go out without the king. Otherwise, why does the Mishnah say, which deals, according to the case of the Mishnah, with the levels of the abilities of the king? And it mentions it here. So you see the king has to be involved. But for the Lashon Rambam, there's no proof that that's what he opinions, because he writes that Melochim mitzvah, he doesn't have to ask permission from the Bezdin HaGodol. He goes by himself whenever he wants. He causes the people to go out with him. But with the war of permissibility, he can't take the people only according to the Bezdin of 71. And it would seem that the Rambam is of the opinion that the Mishnah does not deal with the levels of the king, but just to teach us that the king cannot by himself go out without the Sanhedrin, and therefore just like he can't have more than one wife, more than a certain number of wives, more than a certain number of gold and silver and horses. And even will say that the Mishnah deals with the level of kings, that's only what we infer that it means that in a war of permission he's permitted to force the people to go. By more of mitzvah, he has the right to force people to go without the permission of the Bezdin of the Sanhedrin, because that shows the greatness of the king. But when it comes to a war of choice, the Mishnah does not come to tell us the level of the king. By Beis David, we have the opinion that Rambam says what a king can go to war of choice is not a greater level, because he needs Bezdin of 71. So what's his where is his stature enhanced by that? The Maimonides, Ashkenazi from Hachazaka, says that you can't say according to the Rambam you don't need the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin do not need a king's word regarding the choice war, because we find in Peirush HaMeir is that he puts in the conditions of war of choice that it only has to have the king and the Sanhedrin. And he's of the opinion, like the Kesev Mishnah, that it's talking about regarding the levels of the king. And he adds another proof from the Yerushalmi to tell us this is the rule, because it's that you go out according to the king's word, they go out, and according to his king's words you come, that you need the word king's word, and without him you can't go out to war, wage war. And in truth, you have to also ask the Urim V'Tumim to go out to war, as we find in Sanhedrin 16a. The Rambam doesn't mention it. The Ramban is questions whether that if there a mitzvah, a obligation on the king or on the shofet or the person who is in charge of the people to go out for a war, which is either a mitzvah war or a choice war, to ask the Urim V'Tumim. And according to them, they did what they had to do. In other words, in the time of the shoftim. And it says, before Elazar Kohen will stand, they'll ask about the Urim V'Tumim. Then they'll go out. He and all of Yisrael will ask. Yeshua had a rule of the position of a king appointed on the gathering of Yisrael. Had to ask in the Urim V'Tumim. And according to him, what it said there, they would go out. All the shoftim we find, like in Brochas Gimel 2, in Sanhedrin Tet Zayin A, that the Melech go out, and they went and they asked in the Urim V'Tumim, the Yuma. You don't go to the king or the Bezin, except to those. You only ask the Urim V'Tumim for those people who are in charge of the people. Before Elazar Kohen, you shall ask. That's the Melech. B'nai Yisrael, that's the person who's in charge of the war from the Kohanim. That the war depends upon him too, and all the people. That the needs of the people are required. The Rambam brings this down also in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, the 10th chapter, Halacha 12. The Rambam writes that this is an obligation, a commandment that remains for generations, and it should be a positive commandment. It says that the Rambam wrote the beginning of mitzvahs. We know that Melochim Kibush HaOtzos, that conquer other countries, will only be with a king and with the Sanhedrin, the Godol, which is the 71, and Kohen Godol, it says, as it says in the Pasuk. This commandment is a commandment and not a advice. And it brings from the Gemara in Sanhedrin that you don't go out to Moetzes or Shus only according to Bezin of 71. It says, these are the Sanhedrin. The king has to ask their advice. Sanhedrin asks the Urim V'Tumim. According to the Rambam, it's counted among the 613 mitzvahs. The Rambam doesn't count it. Hamegilus Esther, who always defends the Rambam, cites the words of the Rambam. He says here he feels that the Ramban is right. That it's a mitzvah that's for all generations, so he doesn't have an answer for it. The Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah infers that here he's just mentioning that he needs the Sanhedrin to go out to a war of choice, and he left out Urim V'Tumim. And he's of the opinion that it's not Halacha. He points out that the Rambam here does bring the law, only those things which are requirements. And asking the Urim V'Tumim is not a requirement, because by Vayisheni they didn't have it to ask, and they still went out to war. And he cites from Hilchos Yesodei. And he brings that it doesn't mention the obligation to ask an Urim V'Tumim when you go out to war, because the Rambam disagrees on the Ramban that even when it comes to a Melochim mitzvah you have to ask. The Rambam is of the opinion that when it's a war of mitzvah, you don't even have to ask the Sanhedrin as well. He also asks on the Rambam, according to Maimonides, that even if they ask the Urim V'Tumim, they should not go to war. Don't listen, because when Melochim mitzvah, it's like like the 7 nations or Amalek, you can't ask. The Torah is not in Shemayim, where we have to go to wage war. So what are you asking questions? Therefore, the Ramban explains that since to go to war, even to a war of mitzvah, it has to do with, as we learned earlier, the question of life. Life will be lost. So you have to ask the Urim V'Tumim if they'll win or not. and if they will not win, there's no obligation to go, because they're going to lose. And because nefesh, we rely on the own betumim, because it doesn't tell us the halacha, but it tells us if we're going to win. It tells us going to the Rambam, it's a positive commandment to ask in the own betumim. Going to the Rambam, it doesn't mention it, even though the Megillah Esther argues that the Rambam is correct, the Ramban Nachman is correct. But since he doesn't mention it here, it would seem that the Rambam Maimonides is of the opinion that you don't have to ask. Maybe the language of the Rambam is very correct. You ask in the Atzas HaSanhedrin and the Kohen Godol, meaning the advice. And you should ask in the Rom Betumim whether you should go out to wage war or not. We're learning Hilchos Melochim Perikei Halacha Gimel. In the Rambam, Uporitz Lazis Leiderach, he can break through barriers to make a way for himself. We go to the Peirush. The king has a right to make ways. You can't stop him, even if he's going through private property. When the king decides how wide a street is, there's no boundary to it. Like as much as he needs for his entourage. He does not have to go crooked, make the way crooked because of somebody's vineyard, because of the field of so and so. He goes directly to between the 2 points, the shortest way, and he wages war. Against the Mishnah cites in the Mishnah. In Sanhedrin 20 we find he can break through, meaning walls. They used to have walls to divide, to make a way, and you can't stop him. And the king's highway has no width to it. The Rambam explains Peirush, he goes straight, he doesn't make it crooked. Rashi explains that he can go through other people's walls to go through fields and vineyards. The Lecha Mishnah cites from Rashi that even not for the need of war, but for his own purposes, he may do so. But the Rambam, it seems he doesn't have this right except when he's going to wage war, not for his own needs. In Bava Kama 20b, we learned that a Melech can crash through the walls to make a war from Shmuel Beis. And I guess the Gemara learns here that they broke through into the camp of the Pelishtim, means they broke through from a way that it was not a way before, and they were waging war against the Pelishtim, so they could go, came from an unexpected direction. We don't find that the king is permitted to do so for his own needs. Meiri looks like the Rambam. The Marshal cites the Rambam, and he says that that is the main opinion. Yad Romo, the early Yad Romo, questions on Rashi. It can't be that the Melech can break the walls of others to make a way to his field. Still, Yad Romo is of the opinion Melech is Gederis Acherim. The king can be purged, get the walls of others, and the way of the king has no boundary by Mohamed's Rishus. The Yad Remo Atzmoi is of the opinion that when the Melech has a need, it doesn't mean for war, but he goes with the people, he can go and open ways to make a way, not like the Rambam. But even the Yad Remo is of the opinion that he can't break a wall of others to make a way for his field and his vineyard, and not like Rashi. The Mishnah Moetzes 100b says, the way of the king and the way of the grave has no boundary to it. It means that and this means, the Mishnah says, it would seem that's when you're selling something that's not known, meaning that there's no, usually you buy something, you know how large it is, how small it is. This has no measurements. The Maggid Mishnah explains the acquisition does not take place. The Rambam doesn't mention if you can do it only for war, to make the way, And the Aruch HaShulchan for Osid, which is the Aruch HaShulchan on what halachas that are going to be from Mashiach's time, is of that opinion. But the Rebbe argues they can take the king everything that he needs for his way, and therefore that would be if he had a house that he had to get to every summer, he would be able to go through and make his own way through other people's property to keep it the shortest way. Right? The Rambam writes, a king who cuts down trees of private people and he made a bridge, he can use the bridge. It's not called theft. Or if he destroyed buildings, he made it a way, or he destroyed or he made from the buildings a wall, he can benefit from it. And everything else is similar like that, and I guess everyone can benefit from it. Because when the king decides something, that is the law. He makes a bridge, it's a people's bridge, or a wall, or a way. Even though he took the items which belong to others, and he can benefit from it, because Dina Machus Dina. The Kiryas Seva says that Derech HaMelech has no limit to it, and he can break it open, make his way. He does not have to cause the road to go around. This is all part of Dina Machus Dina. Perek Dalet Halacha Yud, Rambam writes, and everything his deed should be the Shem Shemayim. His thought should be to elevate the true faith and to fill the people with righteousness. Halacha Vav writes, he takes fields and olive orchards and vineyards for his slaves when they go to war. So it seems that he can take them only when they're going out to war. And he needs to pay for it. As we learned earlier, he has to pay for it. So Yaakov says that he could have taken the vineyard of Noves without payment, because a king can take without payment. And Peirush Yosef, questions, maybe that's the source of that Rashi says that a Melech can break down the barriers of others to make a way to his field, because he could take it without payment. On the Mishnah in Bava Basra, Kufam Beis, that he has no measure, it has no width to it, and you can't designate it. The Gemara explains that he can break the walls of others to make a way. The Rambam brings from the Sifri in Parashat Shoftim that a king can do so, and he does not have to go right or left. And he says it would seem that we learn it from what it says, and it says his hat should not be raised above those of his fellow man, that they, just like we learn we say by a Kohen Godol, Gadlehu Mishel Echov. He should not be elevated by himself, but others should help him be elevated. In Mahorias 9a, they learn from the Pasuk that Kohen HaGodol Me'echov, that whenever somebody is appointed to be a Kohen Godol, all the other Kahanim, if he's not the richest, have to make sure that he becomes the richest. Thus we see there's an obligation to cause the king to be rich, and therefore he can break through barriers, and the way of the king has no measurable boundary, because it belongs to the king everything. As the Rambam says, the king does not have to pay for the fields. He breaks through, and he can do so to get his own fields, because everything is in order to enhance the glory of the king. And it would seem that the words of the Rambam, according to Rashi, is a special halacha, shel gadleo mishel echov. All Yisrael are obligated to raise the status of the king, even without him paying for it, at no cost to the king, and not because of Dina de Malchus Dina, but rather not because he has a right to enact something, but rather because you have an obligation to do so.